Is a visit to Eleuthera in the Bahamas part of your cruising plans? If not, maybe it should be. I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share tips for provisioning, suggested anchorages, and navigation tips for visiting this area, known for its friendly locals and good supplies. First, though, let's talk about Marine Electronics Advisor. It's a service from SeaTech Systems. You can get unlimited expert advice as you upgrade and maintain your boat's electronic and communication systems. Got questions about how to install your new AIS? Will that on-sail radar talk to your chart plotter? Can you configure your new Wi-Fi extender? Doing a full electronics refit? The Marine Electronics Advisor has you covered. Use code BOATGALLEY for an exclusive $100 off your first month's subscription. Visit ctech.systems/DIY to learn more. Marine Electronics Advisor, the ultimate subscription consulting service for the DIY boat owner. In 2016, most of our second month in the Bahamas was spent cruising Eleuthera. We hadn't really planned to go there after hitting the berries, but west winds were blowing. Spanish Wall was the ideal destination. Spanish Wells is at the north end of Eleuthera, technically not on Eleuthera, but it's considered to be part of the chain. Eleuthera is world famous for its pink sand beaches, but cruisers know it as a great place to provision with generally calm anchorages and exceptionally friendly people ashore. We had a wonderful time and would recommend it as a mid-Bahamas cruise stop, perhaps after being in other places for a month or more, to top up provisions as well as see the sights. Spanish Wells, Governor's Harbor, and Rock Sound all boast well-stocked supermarkets and are a great reason for cruising Eleuthera. The stores aren't huge, but they have pretty much anything you'd need and some luxury items as well. Prices tend to be about double what the Florida Keys prices are, although we did find some local brands of crackers, soap, and tuna that were far less expensive. There are also some pretty good marine stores, especially in Spanish Wells. Auto parts stores where you can get some diesel or outboard parts and supplies, hardware stores, and liquor stores. Since stores, locations, and reputations tend to change over time, I won't go into the details of those. You can check the current reports on Active Captain. Gas and diesel fuel are readily available, but require jerry canning. Gas and diesel station is about a block away up a dinghy ramp in Governor's Harbor. Spanish Wells does have a fuel dock, but it can be a little hard to get to. Propane was available in Rock Sound. Now, there's good laundry facilities in Spanish Wells, Governor's Harbor, and Rock Sound. Instead of doing it ourselves, we opted to have it done in Rock Sound through Dingles. Back in 2016, it was $14 for 2 loads, picked up, washed, dried, folded, and returned. All very nicely done. I'd paid $10 a load to do it myself elsewhere in the Bahamas. Now, one note is that while beer at that time was $44 to $50 a case, it can be hard to get it in cans if that's what you prefer, which is what we do because it's lighter and less trash, not to mention non-breakable. The 700 liquor store in Governor's Harbor was the only place that had more than just a couple cases of canned beer. A lot of stores had none. Many, but not all, stores on Eleuthera accepted credit cards with no surcharge, a pleasant surprise after Bimini and the Berries, where there had been a 3 to 5% surcharge. Most stores did have a minimum purchase for using a credit card, but this can be a great way to stretch your cash. And speaking of cash, banks in the larger towns generally had ATM machines. We saw them in Spanish Wells, Governor's Harbor, and Rock Sound. Now, Eleuthera sports 3 anchorages with great protection from nearly all wind directions. Since it can be a challenge to find westerly or northern protection, or a suitable place for clocking winds with a frontal passage, these are worth noting. First is Royal Island, just outside Spanish Wells. There's not a lot to do in the anchorage. There's limited shore access, but there's good holding and at least 2 bars of BTC cell phone coverage. Live is also available there. Hatchet Bay. The entrance channel looks extremely tight as you approach, but does have plenty of water and width for most boats. We anchored in the area just to the left with good holding. There are also some moorings, but they're suspect. 2 dinghy docks in town. Both require a scramble up a ladder. If you use a stern anchor on the dinghy to keep it off the pilings, watch out for catching it on debris. We had 2 bad experiences with getting it stuck. Now from here, you can take a taxi up to the glass window. There's great BTC and a live service all over the harbor, and plenty of places to walk around when you're ashore. Then there's Rock Sound. It's big, but there are places to get protection from just about any wind direction, although you'll have to move as a front passes. In other words, there's no one spot to anchor for full protection, but protection from a new direction is no more than a few miles away. There's several nice dinghy docks, a beach, and plenty to do ashore with several restaurants, good stores, and great BTC and live coverage. Okay, let's talk about the cuts in the channels. We opted not to go to Harbor Island from Spanish Wells, as we had no desire to travel the Devil's Backbone and really didn't have the weather for it in any case. The Devil's Backbone is a narrow cut where most cruising guides urge you to hire a pilot. One major attraction of Harbor Island is the pink sand beach. But there are other pink sand beaches on Eleuthera that are much easier to get to. The 2 primary cuts or channels from the deep water of the Northeast Providence Channel onto the Eleuthera banks are Current Cut and the Fleeming Channel. After reading about them, we opted for the relatively easy passage of Fleeming Cut. Okay, it's listed everywhere as being relatively easy. You still need to plan your transit carefully. We were not as careful as we should have been. Wind against current, even a fairly light current of 10 knots that we had an hour after the tide change, made for short period 4-foot waves, including one that just swept our deck. It took us 2 hours to get through the area and into reasonably flat seas again, and we still had larger than expected waves all the way to Hatchet Bay. We were never in any danger and nothing broke, but we certainly didn't expect the conditions that we got. We later talked with other cruisers who also experienced far rougher than expected conditions in Fleeming Channel. They had also gone through Current Cut and said it was actually better for them. We all came to the same conclusion. Cruising guide and active captain do a good job of preparing you for Current Cut so that you know to time it just right. They kind of gloss over Fleeming Cut, and unless you know how rough even easy cuts are in the Bahamas, you don't think you have to time it as carefully. We learned our lesson, and now we carefully plan any passages through cuts to have current and tide running together. We're continuing to learn about currents while cruising Eleuthera and cuts. The tide and wind are important, yes, and we have to plan our leave time and monitor our speed along the way so that we hit cuts at just the right time. Sometimes, if there are 2 cuts in a day, say when we left Eleuthera and went into the Exumas, we may have to just sit and wait at the second one until conditions become favorable. We've also learned to think about what I call sailability. If we had a problem with the engine as we went through, could we sail through a particular cut? Bouncy cuts are the most likely place for an engine to die from stirred up fuel. Powerboaters might want to think of whether they'd have a bailout option or even be able to put down an anchor in a particular cut. Okay, a quick talk. Let's talk about Spanish Wells. It's a prosperous fishing town with a reputation for being dry, as in no alcohol. That changed in 2014. Buddha's now has a liquor store and a bar and a restaurant that serves beer and wine. It's cash only, but Buddha will give you a golf cart ride back to the dinghy dock if you buy enough beer or other alcohol that you can't carry it. Food there is absolutely excellent. Okay, Hatchet Bay. The town here was having a mini festival when we were there, so we joined in one evening. Great food from a stall, and it was wonderful. Now, going to little festivals is a great way of getting to know a town and also a way of making a small donation to the town in the form of buying food from them. We had hoped to sail up to the glass window from them, where the Atlantic Ocean is separated from the Eleuthera banks by only a narrow strip of land. But the winds would have made anchoring there dangerous, so we took a taxi from Hatchet Bay. In 2016, it was $60 round trip for the two of us and a small dog. We got to spend about an hour at the glass window, which was just about right. If you do go to the glass window, be sure to wear protective shoes and be careful as you walk around, as the terrain is extremely rough. A fall would get you pretty cut up and maybe a broken bone. There are no trails there, but it's definitely worth doing. Take water, hats, and sunscreen. There is absolutely no shade. And don't carry stuff you don't need. I had a tote bag full of stuff with me, as well as my camera, and scrambling over the rocks would have been a lot easier without that tote bag. Governor's Harbor. There, we deliberately timed our stay there to coincide with their summer regatta. Dave and I had raced sailboaters for probably, Dave maybe 60 years and I for probably 35. It was fascinating to watch. But even if you know nothing about sailboat racing, it's a spectacle to see. And they always set up the race course right around the anchored boats, so you have a great viewing platform. Okay, you can also walk over to a gorgeous pink sand beach on the Atlantic side. Some call it the French Leave Beach, and others call it the Club Med Beach. There used to be a Club Med there, but it was destroyed by Hurricane Andrew and not rebuilt. It's absolutely beautiful and almost deserted. Locals will give you directions to how to get there. It's, I'm going to say about 1.5 miles away, up a pretty good-sized hill, but it's not too steep on the other side. If you're lucky, locals may offer you a ride on the uphill sections. It takes about 35 minutes each way. Be sure to take water because there are no stores after the first couple blocks, and you want to have sunscreen on. Wear your swimsuit because there's no place to change clothes once you get over there. Dogs were allowed on the beach. However, watch out on the road to and from. There are a lot of sand spurs to get in the fur of a long-haired dog. Okay, Rock Sound. It is a wonderful, friendly settlement with a great selection of stores and services. If you're cruising Eleuthera, I highly recommend going there. There's the Market Grocery. It's like a small-town IGA in the U.S. with a good selection of basics and luxury items. They'll accept credit cards with no surcharge if the purchase is over $20. And if you buy more than you can reasonably carry, they'll usually give you a ride back to the dinghy dock at Wild Orchids. There's a hardware next to the market and a Napa Auto Parts store on the other end of that little strip mall. There's good laundry service at Dingle. There's numerous little restaurants, and there's an office supply store. They carry some printer cartridges, paper, and other things. You could even potentially buy a computer there. People were friendly everywhere on Eleuthera and in the Bahamas in general, but the folks in Rock Sound took it to a whole new level. Not just saying hi, but wanting to have real conversations and get to know us. People striking up conversations in the grocery store. The clerk at Dingle's honking and waving as she saw us as she was driving. Every store offering to drive us and our purchases back to the dinghy dock. Anyways, you're going to love Eleuthera. There's great BTC and a live coverage, both. Have a wonderful time there. It's a great place. Highly, highly recommended. And now, if you found that this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is helpful to you, 2 things. Tell your friends about us, and please, if you're not already subscribed, be sure to do so.